I'm on 4 hours of sleep and on a nondescript energy drink because I'm not sponsored, so you know that I'm just jittery and ready to operate at a higher level and review peak fiction. The big dog is hungry for some peak and he wants it right now. I think I'm slowly losing my sanity in these videos, but hopefully they're still entertaining, or perhaps they're even more entertaining like this, who knows. So as you enjoy my descent to madness, let's review ReZero web novel volume 40. And like I said in the previous video, I think it is very likely by the looks of it that arc 9 will end up surpassing arc 6 as my favorite arc, because the altitude in this peak is so great that I'm having trouble breathing. I'm full of vertigo because this just cannot be topped. Arc 9 is not as existentially thought-provoking as Arc 6, although we can still head in that direction with Al and Subaru, but the story, the writing, the intensity, ever since Subaru was caught in that Pokeball, there has not been a dull moment. Everything has been firing on all cylinders, and I'm just loving it. These 2 volumes have been absolute bangers with no misses. I am almost not wanting Subaru to come back, although you guys know he's still my goat. Obviously I do miss him, but it is a fact that this arc has been excellent without him. Like I mentioned in the previous review, I think that after 40 ReZero volumes, and especially after Volcanica, I think the story was in need of something fresh, something new, and Arc 9 is delivering on that, and it is far surpassing my expectations. And now that we're deeper into Arc 9, I can finally address some of the spoilers that I knew, because yes guys, I did know spoilers. The only way to avoid them in this current social media world would be to live like a monk in a cave somewhere, because for example, when I first made my Twitter account, in the first 10 minutes, which was perhaps not even that long, which was the time for the algorithm to realize I liked ReZero, the first post I get is something about Subaru being sealed. So yes, I knew that one. So yes, I did know that, and I did know, for example, that Roy came back, but I only knew the actual tiny spoiler. I didn't know the context of the what and the how and the why, and sometimes that's even more interesting. And I don't want to go on a complete side rant about spoilers because that's a video in itself, but I do think that the hype spoiler, as in giving you just a small taste to build interest while not detracting from the twists of the story, I think that can be very powerful and garner even more interest. And so I knew enough things about Arc 9 to be very, very interested before even reading, while not knowing enough to ruin the experience for me. Coming into Arc 9 after Volcanica, knowing that Subaru would be sealed, left me just a bit worried because, let's just say, the volumes without Subaru in Volcanica were not my favorite, and that's putting it mildly. My favorite volumes in Volcanica were the hide-and-seek Chaos Flame one, the Gladiator Island one, and the Vincent and Todd one. So all very Subaru-centric volumes. You can say that I'm a Subaru enthusiast. And while I didn't hate the volumes without Subaru, I just think they were a bit weaker, and I think the author in many ways was still adjusting on how to write the main story without Subaru, and I think honestly it paid off. And to be clear, I don't think being a main character-centric show is bad in itself. Some of the most popular shows out right now are very main character-focused. For example, The Apothecary Diaries, which is more story-oriented, and Solo Leveling, which is more unga-boonga action-oriented, and they're both very good shows in their own right. I really don't understand the criticism of, oh, without the main character, this show would be nothing. Yeah, and without an engine, my car wouldn't drive. Like, what's your point? The reliance on the main character only becomes a problem when the story wants to diverge into other storylines and focus on other characters, and those characters are not compelling enough to engage the reader. Personally, I think ReZero has one of the best casts of all time, with multiple characters that could carry a story on their own, so I think we are spoiled for choice, and it is not a problem in ReZero, despite Subaru being a very potent spotlight that sort of overshadows a lot of the other characters. So I was a bit reserved coming in because I do like the supporting cast of ReZero a lot, but at the same time the volumes in Volcanica without Subaru were not my favorite, but at the same time I kind of think some characters would rather be without Subaru for a while in order to get the proper attention they deserve. So a lot of conflicting thoughts, and my main one was, will the story work without Subaru for an extended period of time? Because obviously we can do a few volumes here and there very sporadically, but can a big chunk of a story arc work without Subaru? And the answer to that is no, because Al is also Subaru. I'm obviously kidding, the answer is yes, because Al is an extremely compelling main character that is very similar and yet so different to Subaru, so his perspective, his point of view is just so interesting to watch. Much like Subaru, despite having a completely broken and overpowered authority, Al is still very much the underdog, perhaps even more so because Al's loops are so short, and so he gets his ass beat a lot. Some people say that Regulus, for example, was an authority merchant. Well, Al is pretty much the exact same thing, because without his authority he is nothing. He is the definition of mediocre. He ought to have known that even if his authority was invincible, Aldebaran himself, who exercised it, was banal. His perspective carries a lot of similarities with Subaru, with him also having a very casual way of talking with many English loanwords and game and novel terminology, nerd, and also the fact that, much like Subaru, Al is still a softie at heart. I mentioned this in the last volume, but Al is not a full-fledged villain yet, because both in the previous volume and this one it would be very advantageous to him to not spare the lives of his opponents, and yet he does it. And unlike what Echidna said in the previous volume about declaring war on the world or whatever dramatic things she says, she's a bit overly dramatic, a bit of a chunibyo if you know what that is, but unlike what that said, Al is being very much the pacifist route as much as he can. He wants the only casualty to be Subaru. He had made up his mind, Aldebaran had. From the world she had loved, not a single person more would be lost in the scope of his interference, save for one exception, that of Natsuki Subaru. This is a clear change in his character due to the effect that Priscilla had on him, because I mentioned this many times, Al was always the much more pragmatic one. Back in Arc 5 he had no problem whatsoever doing away with a few lives for the sake of the greater good in his mind, and even in Arc 8 he was very nonchalant about just simply discarding Heinkel and Rowan to their fate, although Rowan did deserve it because he's a piece of crap and a bum and I still don't like him, and I have to find a new nemesis because I can't be in Arc 11 still talking trash about Rowan, okay? So we are looking for a nemesis, maybe we will find him in this arc, maybe we won't, but I'm looking for someone else to this because the Rowan is getting old. He does not deserve that much attention. Al is now not only plagued by the same crippling self-doubt that Subaru has, he now also is shackled by the same moral code that he almost ridiculed Subaru for in the past. So it's a bit of a turn of events. I don't think Al is as still a goody two-shoes like Subaru. I don't think Al will go out of his way to really save anyone, but in terms of what's actually being done, since he's sparing so many people and sometimes going through such effort to do so, it's pretty much the same thing, which is a fascinating turn of events. With this change to his character, Al is becoming more similar to Subaru, however, there is still a huge difference between the two, and one that is very familiar to ReZero readers, and that is the isolation. Al is alone. He is truly by himself. He is in a crew of people that have made some sort of agreement with him and would likely stab him in the back if they had the chance. Al lost his shining sun, Priscilla, and now he has no one. He has no friends, he has no hoes, he has no one that will be there to take him out of the emotional pit that he's in. If we think about Subaru as a character, he's incredibly resilient mentally. He is willing to go through things that many characters would just break and lose their mind. We saw this, for example, in Arc 6, when Spica, or should I say Louis, just could not handle the mental pressure of Subaru's memories. However, he, at multiple points in the series, has had moments where he broke, and he needed someone to help him, be it Emilia, Ram, Otto, even Echidna at one point. Subaru is able to do the things he does because he has an incredible support system of friends and lovers, like Otto for example. But Al has none of that. He is truly by himself. In contrast with Subaru, Al is just a sad man. He's more broken, he's older, more jaded, with no one there to restart him from zero, and now that he has went forward with his plan to go at Subaru, he has likely become an enemy of Lugunica and thrown away his last chance at genuine connection. There's a very short passage in this volume where Al mentions that sometimes he will just reset to be able to calm himself down mentally, and that was a very short passage, but it was so profoundly sad to me because it just goes to show the lengths of his isolation. He doesn't have EMT, he doesn't have Byaku to hold his hand, he doesn't have a friend like Otto to talk with, he doesn't have Rum to pick him up with a hot roast. He has no one. He has sometimes to reset because the only thing he has is himself, and that was just genuinely sad to read. So when you take into consideration how much of an underdog Al is, how easy it is to empathize with him, how much he is a tragic character because at a certain point he is destined to fail. At a meta level, come on guys, the story can't go on without Subaru. Spoilers, the good guys win, I know, shocking, but you know that Al is going to fail with his plan, so there's an element of almost tragedy to his character that's very apparent, and it just makes it so hard for me to not root for him because he's just such a compelling underdog to root for. Al has so many things stacked against him, and his point of view is just so entertaining to read because unlike Subaru, Al can choose his reset points. However, he can't hold one for too long because it has too much of a mental strain on him. And so he is very aggressive, very bold with his new checkpoints, and sometimes to a point where even I'm like, damn buddy, are you sure you want to get the new checkpoint there? That seems dangerous. Al has been one of my favorite ReZero characters in forever, and I am loving him as the de facto main character. And I will be honest, even though Subaru is my GOAT, I will be a bit sad when Subaru comes back because I'm just enjoying this so much. Now, we can't talk about the new main character without talking about the new main heroine, Yae. And yes, I went and checked the Romaji and it is Yae because Yae just sounded off to me. It sounded way too cheery for her personality, which is kind of funny in itself, but Yae is a bit, let's do Yae instead. Yae is a freak in the sheets, or so she says. We have no confirmation at this date, but her relationship with Al really plays into that theme of isolation that I talked about, because she is there for Al, but she is not his friend. She is terrified of him, and when she does her sort of romantic advances, when she offers him her body, it is not out of love or affection, it's just as a tool to get him to disappear faster. Their relationship is very toxic. Yae is a ninja much like Olbart, like we saw in Arc 7 and 8, and ninjas in this world don't really use language as a means for honest communication, they use it as a means for manipulation and subversion. They're always trying to play a character. Ninjas are very good actors in this universe, or maybe these two are just especially gifted, but they're always trying to get the other person to lower their guard down, and whenever Yae does express her honest feelings, you can see that she is quite a ruthless psycho, and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Yes, Yae may be a vixen deep down, a very cruel person, but her character design is cute, she's a ninja, and she uses threads. Did anyone say threads? One of my favorite anime tropes of all time, so she gets a pass from me. In terms of character arc, it is not obvious to me where the author is going with her yet. I can see maybe having a grand plan for her, or she just not mattering much, depends on how he wants to play it. I can see, for example, her having a change of heart and growing to care about Al, or the exact opposite, her just staying pragmatic until the very end, and after this arc is done, just piecing out, never to be seen again. There is a precedent with that with Todd now after Wallachia. Or I can also see her after the arc, maybe something happens to Al and she joins the Emilia camp. After all, there is a precedent in the Emilia camp about accepting psychopathic criminals, so maybe that would be fun as well for her to join the Emilia camp. I can see a lot of possibilities. It is still not entirely clear to me where this is going, but it is clear to me that she is a very entertaining character and I look forward to seeing more from her. And speaking of Yae, I'm just loving Al's crew of misfits. This is a very diverse and strange and entertaining bunch. Al, Yae, Heinkel, Feld, and now Roy. I know the author worked on the Suicide Squad Isekai, which apparently we don't talk about the anime. I've never watched it, but people say it's not good. But either way, I didn't expect him to actually adapt the Suicide Squad into his work, because that's what this feels. How is Al going to team up with an archbishop when we've already established multiple times that these people are so crazy they cannot even be reasoned with? What does Al know that makes him believe this guy can be used and that he can be controlled? And what does Al know that he knows that the guy will agree to work with him? This is all so bizarre to me. Like, what is Roy there for? What is his relevance to the story? I have to know. And speaking of knowledge, by the way, one of the many advantages of having Al as a main character instead of Subaru is that he has a lot of knowledge, both from his lived experience and his time with Echidna. And so he will be just having a random conversation and all of a sudden, boom, huge lore drop, and he will not even address it any further. He just moves on and the reader's like, huh, okay, that seems interesting. It's really, really cool to have such a knowledgeable main character as the main point of view. Anyway, everything about this group of villains with no synergy with each other, and Felt as well, she's there, is super fascinating to me. This storyline is mega engrossing, one of the best storylines in all of ReZero in my opinion. I just can't wait to see what Tappei is cooking with this, and he has done the impossible. He has gotten me to care about Roy, the lamest archbishop, so kudos to him, that's very impressive. If you've watched a few of these reviews, then you know that I tend to focus a lot more on the characters than the specific events in the volume. And that is mostly my personal bias. I think that you can have the coolest story ever, but if I don't care about the characters, I won't care about your story. So to me, characters are by far the most important thing in a fictional series. However, there are some ReZero volumes where I just have to address specific events, and this is definitely one of them. Al and Volcanica vs Reinhard is to me one of the highlights of this volume, perhaps even one of the highlights of ReZero. This absolutely banged in all of the ways that it could. It first of all showed almost the power ceiling of the universe, which is always very fascinating to have these mega powerful characters battling each other. And number two, and perhaps most importantly, it was still a battle of wits between Al and the meathead that is Reinhard. Despite some fans wrongly trying to sell ReZero as this pure psychological horror drama, ReZero has always had battle shonen elements. Ever since Arc 1 we've had fights, and that is totally fine. I think Tappei does a great job at mixing the action with the personal character motivations, which in turn make us even more invested in the action. I think it's always a very good mix. We rarely have fights for the sake of fighting. That's not really a thing in ReZero. When fights mix the drama and personal motivations, that's when they become interesting. However, there is one big problem named Reinhard. Reinhard is stupidly overpowered, and it is inherently difficult to write interesting fights for him because he just wins. For example, in Arc 1, he was almost a cheat code, almost the get out of jail free card. He just appeared and the fearsome Elsa was instantly defeated, and that's just how strong he is. The author has done a masterful job at managing Reinhard throughout the story because he is genuinely a very difficult character to write to not make the story just boring or uninteresting. For example, in Arc 3, he was just not there, which, hey, is legitimate. Come on, you can't have Arc 3 with Reinhard in there. It's a legitimate tactic to just send him away. And for example, against Shirius or Regulus, he put him against opponents that Reinhard can't just unga bunga his way out of. And so by having Reinhard against this very powerful character in Volcanica is a very tough affair to get the reader to care beyond just looking at the explosions, look at the moves, Reinhard smash, brr. Tappei managed to make what this fight could be 100 times more interesting by instead focusing on Al. Al has a wealth of knowledge from his time with Echidna, but he is, as we said before, very banal. He does not have the mana pool to access a lot of the strategies that he does know, but by using Volcanica, he can now actually enact upon his knowledge, and this makes it super fascinating. This reminds me a lot of the fight against Regulus in Arc 5, arguably my favorite fight of that arc, where you have these underdogs experimenting and slowly trying to try everything that they can to see if they can figure out the puzzle of this unbeatable raid boss, except this time the raid boss is Reinhard himself, and that makes it even more exciting. Reinhard cannot be beaten by definition, it's just who he is, but I've always wondered if Reinhard could at least be cornered, and I know, for example, you can't really drown him because he'll just gain the divine blessing of water breathing or some bullcrap like that, but my idea wasn't too far off. Al scorches the air, burning all of the oxygen so Reinhard can't breathe. Yes, Reinhard is unbeatable in combat, but he's still an organic living human being, and so he needs to breathe. And he takes so much damage to his arms. This is as much damage as we've seen Reinhard take, and I was just bouncing in my chair because Al was actually winning. It was looking super good, and then Reinhard just wins. Lol. One of my favorite moments in the fight is when Volcanica uses Al Shario, the giant star spell made by Echidna that was so hyped in the previous arc, and sure, we've had the precedent that Ceci was able to cut it in half, so it was not my expectation that this would be able to beat Reinhardt. However, what he did was just ridiculous. He used the divine blessing of ball balancing. Homie started doing a circus act on one of the strongest attacks in the ReZero universe. Like, what is that? That is just... He is so polite as a character, but Reinhardt's very existence is just disrespectful. And what do you mean, divine blessing of ball balancing? That is so niche, it is not even worth it. But could you imagine you have a divine blessing? Ah yes, what blessing has been bestowed upon me by the heavens? Ball balancing. You can balance these balls, little bro. I don't want that blessing. Give me something useful. This entire fight is incredibly entertaining because, to his credit, Al does try truly everything that he can, and he addresses so many fan theories about what would actually work on Reinhardt and what wouldn't, and turns out the man just has canonical plot armor. He truly cannot be beat. He only has one single weakness: blackmail. I like that my instinct from the previous video was true. Al didn't win, he just simply managed to escape. However, the writing for this fight was so good that I will admit, at one point, for one single moment, Tappei had me believing. I believed Al could win, but we all know how that turned out. Having said that, I do wish Al had tried one more thing, which I don't know if he actually had the means to, which was to replicate what Regulus did in Arc 5. I don't think you can actually beat Reinhardt or really injure him enough. I think you just have to send him away, so just yeet him out of the planet. That is the best possible solution. You just have to try and dodge the moon so he can't come back, although in that case he would just probably say, oh, I went to this planet called Mars and I simply jumped back. You just piss off, mate. The second battle that I want to highlight is Al and the crew versus the Felt Army, and this was very good, and yet I have a bit of mixed feelings on this. In terms of writing, I loved it. This was masterful, a true battle of wits between Al and Rom, with Al making use of very short, very assertive resets to slowly inch his way towards an advantage, just keep pushing and pushing until he eventually reaches checkmate, and on the other hand, Rom making use of every single resource he has to discard every possibility and finally reach an accurate assessment of Al's full ability, which was just mind-blowing to me. And the fact that Rom technically managed to win was just incredible. I think that Rom is such a well-written character, by far my favorite character of the Feld Camp. I just love him so much, and he has this demeanor of an experienced and very intelligent man who's seen a lot of conflict and learned a lot. I love how meticulous he is and how he manages to probe his enemies to find out the best plan for them. I just like him so much as a character, and the brainy giant is such a cool build. I just love his character so much. There's a lot of smart characters in fiction that aren't really smart. They just seem like they were handed the script by the author. Like they have all of this information, their plans always work, they rely on a lot of speculation with information they really shouldn't have access to. It just feels super cheap, and I think one of the hardest things to do in fiction is to write a credible, smart character. And I think Tappei nails it with Rom. Rom feels truly intelligent in a way that is earned. He never really relies on information he shouldn't have. He slowly acquires it bit by bit, and he seems seasoned, experienced. For example, I loved the detail with the fake mirrors. That just seems like something he picked up during the Demi-Human War, something of one of his many tricks in his arsenal. So I love Rom so much. He is incredibly well written, and trust me, writing intelligent characters is super hard. I love Al, I love Rom. I hope I've highlighted how much I've enjoyed their conflict. However, I have to be honest and confess, I still really don't care much about the Felt camp. Felt is my least favorite candidate, and I don't really hate her or anything, but just out of all the 5, or should I say 4 remaining, rip in pepperonis, Priscilla, she's just the one I like the least. I just never particularly enjoyed her, and the thing is, narratively speaking, I think that Felt will end up being queen. It's, to me, at this moment in the story, what makes the most sense. So it triggers my rebel instinct to just root for the other candidates. I don't know, I just don't enjoy Felt that much. And her camp as a whole is just... I mean, I love Rom, he's one of my favorite characters, love him. I like Reinhardt as well. I look forward to seeing Grimm and Carol from X2, but besides that, Ezzo is a dork, and all of the criminals and hobos and the Three Stooges, I don't really care about their characters. And from a pure objective standpoint, I'm not saying they're poorly written or anything. I thought they had very good highlight moments in this book. They were all very brave, much braver than I expected for them. But the thing is, I don't know, I just don't like their personality, their backstory, even their character designs don't do it for me. I'm very indifferent towards all of these characters. And I know a lot of these characters are featured in Felt's side story, but once again, I don't really like her camp enough to have the motivation to go read it, especially because there's just infinite ReZero content to go through. And by the way, small irrelevant spoiler, I guess, for those who don't know, Kimberley, the small hobbit with a bowl cut, he has a divine blessing. The divine blessing of bedroom wiles, which makes him apparently crazy in the sheets, and he manages to seduce a lady, presumably the lady we see in this volume. And listen guys, I love ReZero, but there's a level of goofiness that I'm willing to tolerate, and especially for certain characters that I'm willing to tolerate, and no, I'm not reading that. I don't care, just no. And now for another one of the highlights in this volume. It feels like the entire volume is a highlight, honestly. This volume is a banger from start to finish. Of course, the lady that is loose with the juice, Petra. I said last review that Subaru's book would be picked up by someone. It was so obvious it wasn't even a prediction, but for it to be picked up by Petra is quite a development. The most interesting characters to pick up the book, in my opinion, would be Emilia, Rem, Otto, and probably some sort of villain, and I anticipate this book will be read by more than one person, so for Petra to be the first one to pick it up is a very exciting development. Ever since Wallachia, it feels like Tappei is really cooking with Petra. Her character is just growing so much and becoming more and more interesting with each volume, and this development is super fascinating because she is very young and impressionable, and she loves Subaru obviously, so will she be able to handle the mental damage of having essentially Subaru's psyche inside her, of having access to his memories? And if she does get damaged by this, will this even be undoable? Once Subaru gets unsealed, what will his reset point be? And would this even be worth to undo? Because it is very useful for Subaru to have an ally who knows, but will Petra be able to handle that kind of pressure? It's just so many questions up in the air. I'm loving this storyline. And I have to say, back in Arc 4, when Echidna asked for Petra's handkerchief, I simply took it as more of the trolling by the witch. She just wanted something that had value to Subaru to take it away from him. But now it takes a whole different spin. Did Echidna know that Petra will know? How does that even work? Does Echidna have omniscient knowledge? That's probably not the pronunciation for that word, but let's move on. Does Echidna just know everything? If so, why did she fail at whatever she planned to do? Did she even fail? Did she get this information from Subaru from the future? What loop are we in? Are we in a giant loop? I'm just questioning everything, and this is so fascinating to me because I love when stories give plot twists that make past scenes have a whole different meaning, and this is just, I love this so much. I'm loving Arc 9. It is so good. Overall, I cannot praise this volume and this arc enough. It is everything I wanted from ReZero. The stakes, the twists, the personalities, just interweaving every single storyline and character that we've spent so much time building. It's great. I'm almost wanting to stop myself from enjoying this too much, because if the ending for this arc doesn't deliver to the level that I'm expecting it to, I may be severely disappointed. But at the same time, I have to be honest, in these initial volumes at least, this is peak ReZero. This is some of the best the author has written for me, and it's just truly incredible. So let's see if the glazing session will continue in the next volumes of Arc 9. I don't want to get vertigo from all of this peak, so as always, be sure to leave your thoughts on this volume in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, and ciao!